If you are at the bleeding edge of classic gaming, then you've heard of MiSTer, the open-source FPGA-based emulation platform based on the fundamental goal of hardware accuracy. MiSTer already has tons of cores spanning 8 to 32-bit consoles, home computers, arcade games, and more. In this series, I'll feature one FPGA core every day for the next 21 days to ring in the new year.
It isn't termites. It isn't mice. It's Atari's Dig Dug, the earth-shattering arcade game.
And continuing my MiSTer core countdown to New Year's, coming in at day 2, it's Dig Dug, the arcade game from 1982, developed and published by Namco. Also going to include Dig Dug 2 because both of these cores are done by Mr. X, also known as Mr. XB, who has also done a bunch of other MiSTer arcade cores like Atari Tetris, Food Fight, Galaga 3 or GAP Plus, Green Beret, Ninja Kun, Rally X and New Rally X, Russian Attack, and Mr. Goman, Solomon's Key, and a Tower of Druaga multi-core that runs Mappy, Modos, and Dig Dug 2, which I'll show off in a bit. Now, MiSTer did get Zig Zag before Dig Dug. Zig Zag is a pirate Dig Dug arcade game, and Sorgelig, the guy behind MiSTer, is the one who actually brought that over. But it's just not quite the same as Dig Dug, as curious as it is. And MiSTer is great for arcade games because what we do is, it's basically an evolution of MAME. So we use MAME's ROM dumps. MAME is one of the biggest preservation projects in all of gaming, the biggest in my opinion, because I'm a big fan of arcade games. And MAME has this huge catalog of dumps of the actual chips from arcade games. So the game data, many of the associated ICs that go with them, a lot of the logic is there. And what MiSTer does is the MiSTer devs take that data and they connect it through hardware description language, HDL, in a way that's the same as the real PCB, essentially. So what you get out of MiSTer that's different from traditional emulation is that we can, in FPGA terms, do everything at the exact same time. That's something that's just not possible with software emulation, and to get even an approximation of it, it requires massive resources. So we can do these arcade cores with even relatively simple FPGAs, although we have a powerhouse in MiSTer. But I really love this Dig Dug core. I'm going to show off some gameplay footage from it. And another really cool thing that I love about MiSTer is the fact that with the I/O board or with the direct video options, you have analog output. And as you can see, I have Dig Dug running on a CRT. This is a Sony PVM 2030. And I have it running out through the I/O board so I get latency-free analog RGB video. And you'll notice on the HDMI capture, which you're seeing on the screen, and over here, this one's on the side, and that's because that's how the actual arcade game is. And there's no scaler in the process when you're running it analog out, so there's nothing in the way. So in order to play this, it's just like the real game. You need a vertical monitor, and I also have a PVM dedicated to that, but it's across the room. And so a game like Dig Dug is a great excuse to use the hardware scaler, the HDMI scaler, which will allow you to rotate the screen, which is kind of huge if you're playing these old arcade games, because lots of them are vertical. And as you can see, Dig Dug just plays beautifully. And these classic arcade games are a really good way to see what your sensitivity to input lag is. With games that you're really familiar with, like I'm really familiar with Dig Dug, I'm extremely sensitive to lag to the point that I really don't like any of the console ports, except for maybe the Atari 7800, and the NES port is pretty good. But if you're, for example, the world's greatest Donkey Kong player, and you want to get the exact same experience that you got out of the arcade cabinet, you're not going to get that basically out of a traditional software emulator. You're going to want to get an FPGA-based solution or practice on real hardware. There's just no other way around it. And as I said, Mr. XB also made the Tower of Druaga multi-core, which runs Tower of Druaga, Mappy, Modos, and Dig Dug 2. And Dig Dug 2 was the follow-up to Dig Dug, came out in 1985, also developed and published by Namco. There's a really good NES port of it, actually. And as you can see, it captures the spirit of Dig Dug, but it doesn't really look anything like the original Dig Dug in terms of gameplay. But it's pretty fun, and once you get into it, you'll start to get used to the controls. For me, it's really hard to transition into them for whatever reason. And there you have it, Dig Dug, the arcade game, and Dig Dug 2, both by Mr. XB, and both play beautifully on a MiSTer. I highly recommend going to check it out. I originally got into MiSTer simply because I heard it had Burger Time, and a MiSTer setup was cheaper than buying a Burger Time at the time, and Burger Time, like Dig Dug and Dig Dug 2, is a non-JAMA game, so you have to use some kind of custom harness to get it into your Super Gun setup, if that's how you play like I do. And I'm really glad I got into it, because now we have over, I think, 50 arcade games, and many of those are multi-cores. So for example, Vertex Neo Geo Core plays hundreds of Neo Geo games that are extremely powerful and expensive. So MiSTer is great at cost saving, and it's a really great way to experience these games on a CRT if you want, or on an HDMI monitor with extreme ease, really. It's just so easy nowadays. Anyways, what will be the next core in my New Year's countdown? Find out tomorrow. This video represents a snapshot of the core as it exists today, but by the time you're watching this in the future, it may have been improved or expanded with new features. Hit the subscribe button to be kept up to date with all the latest MiSTer happenings, and ring the bell to be notified when I go live for a stream. If you like the channel, consider supporting it. Patreon support at any level gets you an instant invite to the Smokemonster Elite Discord and early access to my videos. Thank you so much for your support, I really appreciate it.